I've reviewed two Boulder Odyssey Divers watches before, both beasts at 45.5 millimeters. Recently, Boulder has gone on a diet to produce a narrower model called the Odyssey Freediver. I'll give you my hands-on review and let you know what I think about this newer svelte model on this episode of Adventures with Time. A few months ago, I reviewed the Boulder Odyssey 45 and then the Boulder Odyssey 45 Braun Lumicast, both beefy divers watches at 45.5 millimeters. Now I have for your consideration the Boulder Odyssey 40 Freediver, a smaller version of the Odyssey series at just 40 millimeters. There are in fact 8 models of the Freediver. The 3 most recent models come on a rubber strap, are limited to 100 pieces each, and list for $519 US. There are 5 models on a stainless steel bracelet, 2 with meteorite dials which retail for $799, and 3 with ombre textured dials that retail at $649. I believe discounts are occasionally offered on all their watches. All models share the same specifications, which I'll provide next. Other than dial color and material and bezel color, there are a couple of design aesthetic differences between these models. The 3 limited edition models have rectangles and circles rather than the Arabic numerals for hour indices as on the 5 other models. They also lack the printed border around the date window. This model lent to me is the Freediver White Frost. Let's take a quick look at the specifications, during which I'll compare to the larger Odyssey 45 models I've reviewed before. With the Freediver's smaller 40mm diameter, you also get a thinner watch at 14.2 millimeters compared with the 16.2 of the Odyssey 45. Lug to lug is also shorter at just 48 millimeters, where the larger Odyssey 45 models are 52 millimeters. And with the reduced case size, you also get a smaller 20 millimeter lug width. On the rubber strap, this watch weighs in at 121 grams, 12% lighter than the Odyssey 45. We have a screwed down signed 8mm crown, flat sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on the underside, and a screwed down case back, giving this watch 300 meters of water resistance. That's less than the 500-meter water resistance with helium escape valve in the previous Odyssey models I reviewed. Super Luminova on the dial and the 120-click unidirectional diver's bezel. Inside the Freediver is the Miyota 9015 movement, which runs at a swift 28,800 beats per hour and has a 42-hour power reserve. This is a common movement used in micro brands with a separate retail cost of about $115 US. Although you can buy a bracelet separately for this model, it comes with this tropical rubber strap which uses quick release spring bars, something that I always appreciate. The Freediver is a slightly miniaturized version of the larger Odyssey divers. However, the Freediver keeps the same design scheme as the larger watches. Most notably is the angular case shape with substantial lugs and the same bezel grip with cutout finger grips. I do find the bezel hard to grasp with this edge treatment, just as on the Odyssey 45. Perhaps if the bezel was just a few millimeters larger than the case, it would be better. Alas, it's actually 1 millimeter smaller than the narrowest part of the case. In contrast, there is that nice fat 8mm crown with deep gear nodules, which is easy to manipulate. No display case back, which is just as well since the Miyota 9015 movement is not much to look at. Instead, there is a screw-down case back which has a stylized image of the infamous Kraken, surrounded by some watch information and the serial number around the edge. The other thing to note about the case is the sandblasted finish on the top and sides, with just these chamfered edges having a polished finish. This will minimize fingerprints, but I wonder how scratches will appear on those broad blasted surfaces. If you have one of these blasted finished watches, let us know whether it does better with scratches than say a matte finish. Moving on to the dial, this White Frost, like all but the meteorite dials, have a grain finished dial, somewhat like the appearance of sandpaper. The hour and minute hands are obelisk shaped. The second hand is long and thin with a rectangle 2/3 towards the tip and the minute track that sits atop the rehaul. As I noted before, this model uses circles and rectangles for hour indices, where the 6 o'clock hour marker is replaced by a rectangular date window. You get superluminova on these indices, hands, and bezel. Fairly nice illumination for you lume junkies. This White Frost model is quite monotone. Everything has a silver or light grayish or white tone. The only color on this watch is the red tip to the second hand. Although this watch is 40 to 43 millimeters wide, depending on where you measure it, and 48 millimeters lug to lug, I think it appears smaller on my wrist than these measurements would imply. That might have to do with how the angled sides of the lugs get darker and seem to disappear in certain light. But that's not the case for the small, polished bevels. In fact, there are a lot of surfaces to reflect light, especially the chamfered edges of the crystal. Boulder does a good job in building these watches. Every one I've had in hand was free from any manufacturing issues, sturdily built and representative of the Boulder microbrand quality. Just look at the finish on this case. Having said that, I'm not very inspired by the aesthetics of this watch. Nothing on the face of this White Frost model really stands out. It just appears blah to me. What do you think? I don't think I'd like the orange citrus or mint green models better. The orange reminds me of candy. Perhaps there are a couple of fun occasions one might want to wear these watches, but in general, they're not for me. Of all these models, I probably prefer the 28A. The dial seems more alive with the Arabic numeral and circles for indices. I also prefer having that white trim around the date window, and the red bezel adds some color to the aesthetics. But remember, these are just my opinions. What do you think about the Boulder Odyssey Free Diver lineup? Do any of these models interest you? Another microbrand collection which might interest you is the Notice Sector. Here's a video where I have had hands-on to the diver, field, and pilot watches from this collection. If you're looking for something more in the luxury tier, take a look at this video on the Glashütte Original CQ. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.